What assumptions do people make about the creative process, whether correctly or incorrectly, from your experience?
I think sometimes people can assume that there's a really straight line from start to end. And maybe
Mm.
that's something that happens mostly in retrospect. But there's something really enjoyable for me in the like exploratory, playful, curious kind of stage, where it's like, I don't know how these are going to fit together, but I'm excited to find out what the patterns are here or what's going on. And
Mm.
allowing that intention to come from a curious place and following a bit of intuition rather than, oh, I know what this will be, you know?
Mm.
Sometimes that can be a bit of a controlling knee-jerk reaction to like, oh, I see a clear combination, I'll do this. Or I see a clear vision, I'll do that. Um, Assumptions. One thing as well is like it's a whole body thing,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of creative work or creative people maybe think it's just an intellectual exercise. And yes, we feel and we're putting our emotions into it and our memories and our experiences and our thoughts, fears, hopes, and desires, all that stuff. But just like how is the body being brought to this?
Mm.
How is it fitting into your life as a whole? What is creativity serving you? What is your relationship to it? I remember during COVID when we were on lockdowns and I was talking to my counselor about my creativity because I wasn't being creative and that I felt that was making me really unwell. And
Mm.
that was a really interesting experience of bringing this kind of self-reflexive creative practice into a self-reflexive therapeutical practice and kind of understanding what my relationship to it is. And that is a thing I'm continuing to unpeel a little bit. Like at the time, it was very much like a self-efficacy thing. Like when I'm being creative, I feel like I'm doing well, and it's a bit of a litmus test for my general mental health. But now, as I'm re-entering a counseling space and kind of doing more exploration, it feels like, oh, parts of my practice make sense now because I have a very kind of sensitive heart and an overactive imagination, which are not always the best combination, that I need the bigness of what I'm working on to reflect the bigness in me so that it can hold my full attention so that I don't have space for
Mm.
intrusive thoughts to come in or catastrophic daydreaming or self-doubt or any of this stuff. And I look back at my work and think, God, yeah, it is kind of like I don't mean any moral um, qualitative assessment when I say this, but they're ambitious, like they're big, kind of. I like the kind
Mm.
of almost cinematic nature of the stuff that I work on because it's just big and sometimes difficult to actually put into a Word document because I'm like, it's too big, it's too much, I'm getting lost in it here. Um, and
Mm.
and so to bring it back to the assumptions, like yeah, like it's not just this thing, it's not this kind of siloed part of yourself that's functioning in a vacuum. It's functioning as part of you. So if you are a carer, perhaps, and your day is largely outside of your control, and you're beating yourself up for not having the energy to be creative, well, look at your whole life. Of course you can't because you've got a lot of demands on you. So take the pressure off. Find a different way for it to fit
Mm.
in. And so
Yeah,
yeah, when we bring our whole body to it, I think we can find new ways to understand it.
that's so interesting. The way that you spoke about that then. And I want to pull on two threads. The first one is this idea of it being of the bigness having to reflect
Mhm.
your bigness, which I
Mhm.
resonate with. I resonate with so deeply, and actually it scares the shit out of me a
Mhm.
little bit. Like
Mhm.
whenever, and I'm not going to go off on a whole tangent. I'll pick this back up later about the work that I'm doing at the moment to almost like untangle the pressure and the
Mhm.
expectations around the creative process for me in accepting the bigness but not getting overwhelmed by it and allowing it to just like be a thing that exists, and we're not going to get overwhelmed by how terrifying this thing feels.
Mhm.
What does the bigness, how does that look for you in terms of working on a creative project?
So at the moment, it looks like a lot of really different spaces, exploring a lot of really different spaces and trying to find the commonalities between them as an almost conceptual or intellectual framework within which I can then play with, almost like sort of
Mm,
jungle, like a jungle gym, like kind of swinging off the bars or whatever. And I need that structure within the bigness to know where I'm moving so that I can kind of orient myself in that space. So I
mm,
will kind of contain it by being like, okay, let's talk about psychedelics as a creative thing. Let's bring in what happens when I pair that with the idea of witchcraft or the idea of quantum physics, or what if I pull in cryptography and puzzles or the study of games and gaming, and like all these kind of Venn diagram overlappings kind of help create the structure for me to go, okay, that's what I'm in. And then at the moment, I'm kind of letting the sort of thesis of it percolate and ferment so that I can understand what it is I'm trying to say with that. And also the bigness, I think, is about trying to say something true that's more than just about,
mm,
that's
mm,
more than about me.
mm.
It's led by me, sure, and it's led by my experience, but trying to tap into something that feels universally true, which is probably a bit of a fool's errand to begin with, in that sense of trying to be a bit mystic or a bit druidic about it, like, oh, I'm going to say something true. And it's like, well, that doesn't really matter.
Mm. I'm I'm curious your thoughts on that, because it makes me think of back in the old days, the good old days, um, before before we had such levels of awareness of our own existence, that we've always been doing this. And there's always been artists within community that have wanted to create something big, but they didn't have the level of self-criticism, I guess, about the
Mm,
size of what they were trying to do. They were just creating. And I wonder how much of an impact that has on all of us as creatives in terms of criticizing our creativeness before we've even begun.
mm. I think a lot of it, as you were talking there, came up of like the world was smaller 50 years ago.
Yeah.
We didn't know what was going on necessarily in the other side of the world as immediately as we do, or
Mm-hmm.
as deep as we now know, or as kind of 24/7 as we now know. And in some ways, I heard this quote in school that electricity was the death of the witch. And that always stuck with me, that we
Mm-hmm.
stopped telling ghost stories. We stopped having this kind of folkloric aspect to our life. And in some ways, like the 24-hour news cycle is the death of the story sometimes, because life is just a soap
Yeah.
opera. It's just a soap opera now, where there's going to be another drama, another, EastEnders drum roll at the end of every day. So what's the point?
Yeah.
What's the point of it? And so there's that where our worlds were smaller in a positive way, and so that it maybe took less for us to reach outside of that and tell something true. or that we just knew the community we were speaking to in a kind of hyper local sense. So there was less criticism, or if it was critical, we kind of could stomach it because we're in that environment, we're in that lineage, or in that community. Whereas now we're talking to 8+ billion people.
Mm,
It's impossible to do that without criticism. But because the stakes are so high,
mm, mm,
if I want to sit and talk about the trees and Mary Oliver and mushrooms and like all this stuff, I'm being criticized by not talking about something on the news
mhm,
because I'm somehow
mhm,
ignoring it, or I'm somehow not acknowledging it. And I think that's a fair criticism, to be quite frank with myself. I've kind of maybe stopped writing capital P political work because I just found it too confusing and I got burnt out a bit too much on trying to keep up
mhm,
and say the thing. And maybe in those spaces, this idea of the universal truth is more complicated, that I don't have the nuance to explore, or maybe
mhm.
it doesn't exist, who knows? But it does feel like we're starting to almost see the end of a kind of existential structure as it has stood. You know, you look at something like the Backrooms movie and
Ah,
how
don't.
I haven't actually seen
Uh,
it, and I think I might be too scared to watch it in the cinema, so I'm gonna have to wait for it to come out on streaming because I can't watch scary movies in the cinema.
well, okay, wait. Well, we watched The Substance together, right?
Yes.
Did we?
Yeah, we
Yes, we
did.
did.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I I wouldn't say it's worse than that.
Oh, okay, like it's scary wise.
There's like there's no spoilers, but I mean it made me jump a
Right.
couple of times, but like it's such a I don't want to say the word beautiful film,
Mm,
but it
okay.
sort of also is. And now that I've started doing a bit of a dive into the lore and all that stuff around it, because I didn't really have much of a concept. I'm too much of a millennial. But and it was so like, I don't know, so rich in its visualness and the
Mm,
sound design and like the vibe and the thing that it encased you in, that I was like excited about the fear. It was
mm,
and I'm not a
mm.
horror film, but
Interesting.
historically never thought that I am a horror film person. Anyway, not to push you to go and watch it in the cinema.
Okay.
However,
Okay. I'll take your
I
word for
coped with
it. Okay, good.
it.
You can be my canary in the gold mine. That's fine.
Anyway, we digress. What were you saying?
But that sense of like, I think that movie can only really exist in this age, right?
Yes.
This kind of non-Euclidean, not to use the kind of buzzword going around it, but like this kind of very House of Leaves-esque maze within a maze, story within a story, and this kind of broken compoundedness that
Hmm.
seems to happen within it. That's like showing a Viking an iPhone, they would just lose their goddamn mind. Show that to someone in like the 1950s, they'd be like, what the hell is this almost? Just because the
Hmm.
concepts, the aesthetic concepts just don't really exist.
Hmm.
So I think now in this constant murk, Black Mirror-esque world we sort of inhabit today, it can be harder to find that meaning and to find that bigness and to know what that bigness is because everything's big and small. Everything is,
And
to quote another movie, everything is everywhere all at once kind of thing.
yeah. And um, I wonder, not to get too deep, too existential, but we love an existential conversation, is that I just wonder how much creativity is being lost out
Um,
of the fear of that bigness. Like, because, or not even the fear of the bigness, but it's the fear of receipt, like, of it not being understood and
um,
it being immediately criticized. So I was listening to an interview with the director of Backrooms, and obviously he's a 20-year-old YouTube sensation guy. And he sounded so grounded and so mature and really like steady and stable. And he was just like, but at one point in the conversation, he did say he spoke directly to his upbringing and the
um,
fact that he was encouraged and he grew up in a household where he was like he was just allowed to exist in his creativity.
Mm.
And I think there's a very special thing that has happened to him in that within his household his creativity has been allowed, and then he's also tapped into this niche part of the internet where the weirdness of his creativity has also been received and allowed.
Hmm.
And not to take anything away from how how incredible he is, but in that I can see so many points where if things had been different in the way that he had been received, would we have gotten out of him what he has produced? And that's just using him as an example
Hmm.
of how much creativity is being missed because of that fear of receipt. And
Yeah.
that leads me, one thing, I'm just going to go and turn the oven off before my butternut squash
Explodes.
burns. And then I've got a follow-up. And then I've got a follow-up question. Okay. That leads me to follow up with onto the work that you do, because the mentorship work that you do with people. And I'm curious whether that is a thing that shows up frequently when you are working with someone on a creative project.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Just to kind of tailgate the backrooms thing, as you were talking, I had this image of like they were opening, they weren't restricting the floodgates of flow for him, so that
Mm-hmm.
he could catch the wave of that zeitgeist to create to
Mm-hmm.
to find a Reddit post and go, oh, imagination runs wild, create a really successful kind of Reddit lore page that now becomes one of the
Mm-hmm.
leading films of the year. Like that, I see that as like a flow state of him catching a wave.
Yeah.
And when I do my mentoring stuff, it feels slightly similar in that the most comparable thing I have is like reading tarot cards. Because I
Okay.
kind of am just responding to people in the moment. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, I'm bringing my experience as an artist in there, um, and I'm trying to actively listen. But sometimes I'll say something and be like, I have no idea if that's helpful, where that idea has come from. Am I just chatting absolute bollocks here? Like, what was that? And then sometimes, that advice gets developed by the person and it's great, and sometimes it's less helpful. But I think even in it being less helpful, it's still helpful because they've made a decision and
Mm-hmm.
they've kind of pruned off all these other choices they could be making and decided, no, I now know the thing, like playing Guess Who. I've flipped all these heads down now, so I know where to go. And I think there's just something very particular in a one-on-one relationship where we've kind of
Mm-hmm.
set the rules of engagement. You will talk, I will listen, and we will have a free-flowing conversation about what to do and where to go from here.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's just simply mirroring back to someone what it is I'm hearing so they can hear it out loud and go, oh, amazing. Right, I now have a parameter to work with and I now have a little thing to help with. I just had one
Mm-hmm.
recently where someone's exploring these three sort of anamorphic characters that are representing parts of their own experience and what they're writing about. And we kind of went through each in turn, and they're saying all the things. I'm just saying back to them, I'm
Mm-hmm.
hearing X, and I'm going to put this word on it, this label on it, and maybe that label can help you see a structure or a
Mm-hmm.
relationship or a tension going on there that you can't see because you're in it. And so a lot of it feels very intuitive. A lot of it will be stuff that I'll go, I'm going to try that myself because that sounds like good advice. Like not to big myself up, but like, oh yeah, okay. So I'm learning a lot from the
Mm-hmm.
relationships too because the thing is coming, and then I'm going, oh, maybe I could try that. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
developing different tools. In that same call, we had a discussion about getting lost in the exploration of this stuff because it's deep and it's emotional and it's personal, and we could get a bit lost in it all. And I use the kind of metaphor of like you're doing a deep dive here. So imagine that you're going to be lost in a sort of 360 aquatic world, and for it to okay to be lost, the question we need to answer is how do you come up for air
Mm,
and retain what it is that you've held or you've seen down there. So we came up with the idea of doing a like a profile, and the profile is just 5 bullet points that are the anchors of what you've discovered, and then what we ended up calling a compost heap of absolute garbage after it. That's just a free flowing, wild thicket of information. So that when you inevitably have to put that aside for whatever reason, you don't have to do all this work to reorient yourself as you come back to it. You've got a little bit of a cheat sheet to
mm,
remind you this represents X, Y, and Z, and then here's some more stream of consciousness, loose association stuff to help you get back into that cosmos of meaning that you're kind of trying to inhabit and capture. Um, Not unlike a psychedelic experience, right? You have the
mm.
highlights, and then you have all this other stuff that is just kind of
Yeah.
uncategorizable. So it's very similar in that respect of, yeah, just trying to listen and offer. And that's not a practice I have. I don't do that. I might start, but it's interesting to just be in that relationship and to see what the person needs
Mhm.
because it's not my problem. I'm not in the woods trying to work it out, so I can be a bit more objective and just go, have you tried this system? And I think I'm quite a systems
Mm.
orientated person. I think I like to understand process and systems and how things work, even
Yeah.
in my day job, even in, how do I iron properly? Like, what's this tech? I struggled with doing ironing for years as a typical Irish mammy's boy. And then my partner showed me, oh, if you place it on the board like this, the sections line up. And I was like, that makes perfect sense now. That's why ironing boards are shaped. That's why they're shaped like that, and that's why it works. And now I love it because I understand the process.
Yes. Yes, 100%. If I don't understand something, and this can be anything, I am immediately rageful.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I with anything, I'm like, my immediate response is rage. And then once I understand the logic behind it, and I'm like, okay. And okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
just
Got it.
move
Let's
on
go.
with my
Yeah. Yeah.
life. I'm like, fantastic. But then if we continue and I don't understand your logic, then that we have a problem. Um, and to your point about the reflecting back to people, it I mean, we know this for ourselves when you want to vent about something, or you just have to, you get it out and you don't remember what you've said.
Okay.
And it's like when you're talking to your partner about something and you're maybe making a complaint, or giving some constructive feedback on the way that they do certain things, and they ask you for an example and you're like, I don't fucking know,
Oh my
like
God.
I can't give you a concrete example. How dare you ask
You
me
want
that?
receipts? How dare you ask for
It's
receipts?
just, how dare you? Um, it's it's having that person that it's like almost the person on your shoulder that's like, actually, here are the receipts. Here's the root of the information that you need to be able to
Okay.
give, and you're like, okay, fine. And it is so important. I mean, it's why therapy exists, right? It's why any sort of thing that you consent to go and do that is to improve yourself in some way, there is another person involved.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, not everything. You do a lot of stuff by yourself, but there are always support people in that process, because we are not supposed to build things in isolation. That's not what humans are built for.
100%.
So, and I know from having mentoring with you that it is so, I will always remember the conversation that we had where I've fuck knows what I was going on about for 45 minutes, but you so succinctly sat there and just said, well, yeah, of course it makes sense, because everything that you do is the crossover between stories and people.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh my God, I've never realized that
Mhm.
before. And I am such a verbal processor, so I will just yap, 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 yap. And then eventually, like, I will get clarity out of it after all of the yapping. So it is so useful to have someone on the other side that's just like, okay, she's said this thing in 5 different ways. So
Yeah.
then
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
the core of what she needs to know is this.
Yeah,
And then I've got the information and I'm
yeah,
like, oh, cool. Because I always come back to that now with my work, with my life. Like the things that matter to me the most are stories and people. And that is a sign that I'm on the right path of doing
yeah.
things. With the mentoring, I mean, not just the mentoring, actually. Like, I'm really curious because we went to university together, but we weren't on the same course. We just sort of like crossed paths between people. Um, what led you on this path? Like, how did you know you were a
Hmm.
creative soul?
So we probably had this conversation a few times in different guises, but I probably
Hmm.
think it was like catching the tail end of a like space documentary as a kid and learning that the sun's going to blow up in 5 billion years, and my
Hmm.
system, my little childhood system, could not cope with this. And as a result, like the idea of like apocalypse or Armageddon was a real trigger for me as a young person. Like I remember once having an absolute meltdown during Eurovision because some band played the final countdown, and I went apoplectic and lost my shit, you know? Um, like the whole 2012 Mayan thing, that got a little
Oh,
bit
God.
too rooted in me for for comfort. I was like starting to believe it a little bit more than I would any other kind of conspiracy theory or kind of strange, almost creepy pasta thing that comes around. I'll be like, yeah, whatever. But that kind of took a hold on me deeper than I would have
Hmm.
expected to. And I think it was the response my nervous system had at the time was to like naively try and live forever in work outside myself. But
Mm.
also, I don't think I was a very good or am a particularly good communicator. I think I got lost in my feelings. I get turned around really easily. And I think writing and performing are ways
Hmm.
for me to hone my opinion on things or to understand how I'm feeling about things. And I think
Mm.
it's moved on from I'm trying to avoid apocalypse by writing some poems like that. It's moved on from that now. It's no longer that. It's now more a little bit about, it became at university about power and agency and control and sort of finding my own voice in a way, which is
Yeah.
very kind of cliche, in, I suppose, in a way. And now it feels a little bit more that it's caught up with me and it's riding side saddle to my lived experiences kind of as they happen, but it's also helping me pave the path forward a little bit. I go back to
Mm.
previous work and I'm like, that's the seed of what I'm doing now. And it's like every
Hmm.
new thing is a Russian doll opening up into the next one. And we know this only in retrospect, that's all well and good, but yeah, I think it was a way for me to be in relationship to myself, mostly.
So, can you remember when you first started writing?
Hmm. Yeah. I remember,
How old were you?
oh gosh, like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Like my memory at that age is really fuzzy.
Mm.
But I had this red folder, this like plastic red folder that I was writing a fantasy novel in. And I had maps, I had flags, I had like family trees, and like all these people in my like friends and stuff were characters in it, like really veiled. Like the names were changed ever so slightly, so it was really obvious who was who. Um, and it was like very Lord of the Ringsy, but I was also trying to resist the typical fantasy world. So it was like we're gonna have weird characters and like unusual
Mhm.
stuff. I remember there was a monk who could like travel via shadow. I don't remember any of the characters. I don't really remember the plot, but it was like a kind of save the princess plot thing. And that was probably serving a bit of escapism at the time because I didn't
Yeah.
particularly enjoy growing up in the school structure that I liked, or, I did like fantasy as a kid. I'd read a lot of like The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. Harry Potter passed me by somehow, but I would read like the Samuel of Amarkand, and I can't remember the author's name, which is terrible. Um, but like unusual kind of fantasy stuff, and I'd find myself reading stuff that maybe other kids my age weren't because I just found it more
Mhm.
interesting. So I was, yeah, definitely just escaping into it and like living in this fantasy land where everything I said goes.
Mm. And when did you decide, w- was there a moment where you decided I'm gonna I'm gonna try and do this as my life's path, almost, not to put too much of a
Yeah,
heavy phrase on it.
yeah. I had a very sort of odd and I suppose unique introduction to that kind of phase of life. So I was doing a 2-year NVQ, like a kind of post-school, pre-university course in holistic health. So I was training to be massage therapist, Reiki practitioner, aromatherapist, all the kind of stuff. I think I was there because I needed to heal, and I
Mm.
found a group of women who could teach me about healing, and it was beautiful. Um, and it was government funded, subsidized, so I had to do some kind of like basic courses like first aid, business studies, and communications. And I was in a relationship that wasn't the healthiest at the time, and I'd kind of put my creativity on the back to avoid confrontation within that relationship. But so I hadn't been creative in a very long time. One of the assignments in the
Mm.
communications module was a short story, so I kind of had permission to write. And I remember writing the story about this burnt out, writer's blocked writer sitting in a cafe, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, all the people around him get turned into like circus acts or something you'd see at a circus. Um, and it just being like a kind of sensory overload of like light and color and sound, and yeah, like the grandmother with her kid was a bear trying to pick out coins from her purse, but the claws can't quite catch it. And the server being, one of the showgirls in a glittery sequined kind of corset thing. And then the whole kind of joke is that she gets the order wrong. He orders something else. And it's like, I suppose what I was trying to say is that it doesn't really matter if it works as long as you're just doing it, as long as you're
Mhm.
leaning into the spectacle of creativity, then go for it. These people are in their flow state, dancing around, making coffees. He's just living in this normal world. And even though what he gets is wrong, it's exactly what he needs. And
Mm.
I remember, so I wrote it and went in for my assignment, and we had like a tutorial with our teachers one on one. And I can't quite remember what happened in this moment, but she was like, "This is really good," and part of me was like, "Hell yeah, it's really good! Like this is what I do." I wasn't doing it at the time, so I don't know where that confidence was coming from. But
Yeah.
she recommended that I send it into a competition, so I was like, "Okay, cool. Like, what's the harm?" And I remember getting a phone call from this competition, literally standing outside where I used to work, Topshop, with my manager, like waiting for the shortlist window and getting a voicemail from someone in the competition to say that I'd been shortlisted. And I was like, I don't know what that means. I had to Google what shortlisted meant on the way home. And then I realized, oh, okay, I'm up for this award. That's kind of amazing, incredible. Okay, cool. It was the day after Paddy's Day, so my good friend decided to go teetotal on Paddy's Day, and we drove down to Waterford the next day. And like my friend is like one of my best mates. He's so sweet. He's not necessarily a creative person, and I don't think he would mind me saying so. He's a very, high functioning nurse in a very kind of technical and I would say almost like rigid environment. Um,
Mhm.
and so he could teach me how to make a bed, but like wouldn't know how to write a short story. And so we went down and they were reading through the awards, and so I was in like the kind of the final section, like the senior national category. And instead of reading out the name of the writer, they read out the name of the story, which my friend didn't know. So when they announced the name of the thing and he didn't hear my name, he sort of turned and looked at me a bit like sullen and sad. And I'm like staring back at him, going like, I have to walk up there, but I can't. Like my legs won't carry me. Um, and I remember standing there next to John Boyne, who at the time was like the hottest thing in the world. The Boy in the Striped Pajamas had
Hmm.
just been made into like a Hollywood movie. He was a very kind of like probably one of the first modern Irish international writers that had that level of like, wow, who also
Hmm.
hadn't been completely disowned by the Irish public because we tend to do that to people who are successful. Who go, like, you're not one of ours anymore. And like the mayor was there, and this giant comic-sized check came out for like €2,000 that I completely forgot about. I didn't really read the terms and conditions of the competition, and it was just this like something just switched in my brain to be like, I have to do this. Like I've been wanting to do this
Yeah.
for so long, but for whatever reason, I've just avoided it and blocked it. That was in the
Hmm.
March, and I'm pretty sure I was in. That was March 2011, I believe,
Hmm.
and I was in crew in September at uni. So like I made
Oh,
this.
wow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was
So you
fast.
hadn't even applied
No, hadn't even
to
started
the
looking.
university?
Hadn't even started looking. I wasn't going to go to uni. I was going to set up a little therapy practice, live at home with mum and dad, and just kind of be like a bit of a, I don't know, a bit of
Wow.
a free spirit. And I certainly wasn't going to move to England. Like that was never on the cards for me. But I couldn't find a course that I wanted to do in Ireland. Maybe I'm just bad at searching the UCAS website or the CAO website. But it was always like a module as part of a bigger degree. And I'm like, I was
Mm-hmm.
genuinely debating, do I do a politics degree just to get a creative writing module? And I'm like, no, I fucking hate politics. I did it in school, and I cannot imagine that being a nice thing to do.
Oh my God, that's not where you belong.
No, absolutely not. And I found the course in crew, and like not many people emigrate to the bright lights of crew, let's be honest. But I
No,
remember
they do not.
flying over for the open day with my dad, and like as soon as I walked onto the campus, being like, yeah, this is where I belong. And meeting the staff and getting to
Hmm.
understand the way they interpreted what creative writing was. And that course was actually the first creative writing course in the country. And it's the only one, well, was the only one taught in a contemporary arts department. Every other creative writing degree in the country is in a humanities or an English department, so it's taught completely differently. And I had friends who did the course in Manchester, and they were like, "This is an English lit degree. I hate it. I don't want to do this." We were taught creative writing like the way musicians are taught music or actors are taught about drama. So we were encouraged to experiment and play and God forbid,
Mm.
perform. I remember the first time they set an assessment that was a performance assessment. There was like an audible gasp in the room. And I realized that a lot of my fellow pupils, fellow students, were maybe a bit more on the introverted side and didn't want to be up front. Whereas I just kind of all saw
Hmm.
it as like, yeah, like let's have it. Like whatever you want me to do, I'll do.
Hmm.
And I was in an institution that respected that. I was an adult, I had the agency. It wasn't like being in English school and English class in school where I was kind of
Hmm.
ignored and set aside. And so I became the teacher's pet and reveled in it and loved it so much. And I think because of the staff there, they were incredible. They
Yeah. Yeah.
assessed stuff that was probably unaccessible. Like, I remember submitting
Yeah.
like a digital maze of password protected websites for an assessment and just being like, work it out. It's part of the process. And they were like, Okay, I think so. How do we do this?
I'm obsessed with that. That's
Yeah.
so good. I never knew that. Oh
Very
my
back, very,
God, I love
very
it.
backrooms. Yeah, it was like the whole thing was like, oh,
Yeah.
we're learning all these things to keep the reader engaged. Well, what happens to the
Hmm.
reading experience if we put a really severe block in the way and play with the
Yeah.
idea of engagement? So to read the
Yeah.
next page, you have to solve like a puzzle, like a maths puzzle or a dingbat or a
Mm.
word puzzle. And I love games. I love gaming, but I love like the concept of that
Yeah.
as well. So like something like House of Leaves, like totally up my street. Um, and I think
Hmm.
because that play and that curiosity was not only welcomed but supported and given the same level of respect and assessment as the other, maybe more traditional
Hmm.
assessments from myself and other students, where I was like, oh, I kind of can do whatever the hell I want. As long as it's sound and true to me, then pe other people will catch up.
Yeah. How has your relationship with time changed around your creativity? Because
Mm.
from my own experience, being the ripe old age now of 35, is that I have thankfully um refreshed, reconfigured my relationship with time and my creativity
Mm.
now to a place that I'm significantly more comfortable with. In that, for me, it's accepting that I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. So, therefore, I have the rest of my life to do it.
Okay.
Whereas in my late teens, early 20s, and I definitely had this, like, I knew I was a writer underneath everything that I was doing. And a lot of, like, my course was English literature and drama, but my favorite part of the drama side was reading other people's work and
Mm.
basically like pulling it apart and figuring out what the meaning was. And that was my favorite part of my degree, was like, what does this mean? And then being really like deep and existential about everything. And I can see, I loved it, I did love it, but now looking back, I can see how much of that was a protective mechanism against doing my own
Right.
work, because I specifically remember there was one girl in particular, I can't remember her name, but there was one girl in particular at our university who just seemed to do everything really well creatively. Like,
Right.
she would sing, she would play music, she was like publishing her first novel, and I was so envious of her. And um and I would sit with that and be like, and I come back to it quite a lot of like, what, I was so envious of her freedom
Mm.
with her own creativity.
Mhm.
And I have worked, it's taken a lot of fucking work to get to this point now where I'm allowing my creativity to exist as it needs to, and trusting that it's all going to pan out exactly the way that it's supposed to.
Mhm.
And that the only responsibility that I have is to keep trying and to
Yeah.
keep showing up and to keep allowing myself to be in the space to allow it to come out in whatever way it needs to come out. And I wonder what your experience with time and creativity has been like and how it's changed.
Mm. The most recent kind of thing I can understand of my practice in relation to time is having done some work with the amazing poet Tina Sederholm on what we're calling the morning pages, so
Mhm.
Mourring, whatever it is, that it's seasonal. That
Mhm.
we have our
Mhm.
own seasonal patterns of creativity, and that might align with the natural seasons, it might not. It might be quicker, shorter, longer. It might have multiple loops in it, who knows? But that there is a, I don't have to panic if it's winter
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
myself.
Mhm.
Also, I think just having a sense of like the long game with it, like I've got this project that I'm working on, this play, and then I have a poetry collection lined up for after that. And I'm kind of trying to keep 2 feet or 1.5 feet firmly in the play whilst allowing my toes to get wet in the poetry collection at the same time, but knowing how much time they're going to ask of me, and also the different qualities of time that I can engage with them. So one is much more technical and structural and trying to like do a bit of that assessment scholarly work of like, is this all working? Is everything being said? And I've just sent it to someone today to do the first official read of the whole thing. And it's not perfect, and there's notes in there, and stuff's going to change. But I just said I need to get it out now because it's time now.
Yeah.
The messiness is fine. And knowing that I can just noodle, it's the words that we talk about a lot,
Yeah.
just be with and imagine the other work and sort of start to slowly let that come into focus and ask questions or add provocations in. So the other night when I couldn't sleep, I have this idea of there being a maze in this poetry collection. Um, and obviously, when I think of that, I go to like the Minotaur and Ariadne, and I was like, oh, Ariadne's thread. That's an interesting image. I can play with that a lot. What does it mean? Okay, it's not just about finding our way; it's about finding our way home. Because she doesn't give it to Theseus, Perseus, whichever one it was, to find his way in. She gives it to him to find his way home. And then I was like, is there, and I don't know enough about this subject to say now, but could there be a link between that and like string theory? Let's go learn
Mm.
about string theory and see if there's some kind of spiritual thing, spiritual truth, universal truth, whatever kind of buzzword I want to use for it, that I can find in that alchemy of those two things.
Mm.
And then I go, well, what's the Minotaur in a string theory context? Right? And just play with it and be like, I'm gonna let that sit
Yeah.
there. I'm gonna let that sit there. Or like starting to slowly build structure. So I've got like a kind of beat sheet that I have developed for it because it worked really well with the play and helping me build structure. And
Hmm.
so, and it's more just like a series of graphs at the minute of like another thing that I want to play around with is this relationship between cryptography and
Mm.
puzzle and games and puzzles. And I see them representing like unhealthiness or trauma in the body. Um, Cryptography is a message that's trying to not be understood. It's trying to be secretive. That represents a trauma cycle for me. Either you're kept in it or it's kept away from you in some way. But there is a logic to it. There's a catch in the tail. There's a twist in the knot somewhere that if you can find it, it can come apart. There's a way to decrypt it, essentially. Games are the same thing, but they are inviting you to play. They go,
Hmm.
there's a secret here. Can you spot it? Let's play. And
Mm.
I remember having that. I've always loved video games. I've always loved games in general, like board games, even charades. I used to go nuts on Christmas Day until we could play charades. Like, just let me play charades. But I had everyone in my family absolutely like mad with wanting to play charades. And I remember during lockdown getting really obsessed with Cluedo because they'd brought out an
Mm.
app. So I would lie in bed and like trying to sleep, but actually just playing Cluedo on my phone. And I had this like almost Rain Man moment where I was like, oh, this is Sudoku with people. This is just Sudoku.
Mm.
And by that logic, because I was also playing Sudoku a lot and could, I think my score on Sudoku was like 3 minutes 38 seconds. Like it was something that I surprised myself because I'm not good at numbers apparently. It's a story I've told myself. And I started to play it more and more and saw the patterns and saw the strategies that could be applied. And so I
Hmm.
tried it out on a few games of Clue, and then I was like, I understand the game completely. The game is not necessarily to find out who the killer is. The strategy is to gather as many clues as possible. Because if
Mm.
I line them up horizontally or vertically, and then find out which one of them isn't it, then it must be one or the other. And it becomes like a domino effect of like, well, if this is this here, then it can't be there, and if it's not there, then it has to be there, and it is there, it's not there. So in
Hmm.
one turn, I'm actually gaining 4 or 5 pieces of information because everyone gets the same amount of information per turn. So it's about how can you line it up to multiply the amount of information you're getting from one turn, and
Mm.
that's how you beat the game essentially. And then I used to wake up to Radio 6 in the morning. It was my alarm clock, and it was Professor Hannah Fry talking about this exact thing that Cluedo is Sudoku, and that it's just, and I was like, ha,
Oh my God, I love it when stuff like that
yeah.
happens.
And it made me go, games are puzzles
Yeah.
plus play,
Yeah.
you know? And to link that back to the idea of cryptography and trauma, whatever, like by the time it gets to being a game, it's like it's open, it's ready to be explored.
Mm.
It's stepping off the edge into that therapy modality, into that psychedelic retreat, into that breathwork practice, whatever it is. But
Mm.
it's asking to be played with, and it's asking to be
Mm.
solved and healed in a way. And so
Yeah.
the beat sheet for that collection at the minute is just a kind of like if this happens here, it has to taper off by here, and then from here we can build it up, and just creating like a kind of visual graph of how it works in
Mm.
that sense. So that time, I'm doing really well at remembering all the different layers of inception to this conversation I brought. That the quality of time and time energy that takes is different than sitting with a
Yeah.
script and working out the kind of flow chart of conversation. So I can kind of do a little bit of both, knowing that it's gonna be slow.
Mm-hmm.
and I'm happy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy for it to be slow.
Yeah. Have you always been happy for it to be slow?
No, dear God, no. No, need it now, need it immediately, need it yesterday. Chasing the thing, you know what I mean? Like chasing the
Mm.
product. And I think after my first book was published and I finished the book tour, and that was like the kind of end of the project for me, I fell off the wagon completely. And that's when I had,
Yeah.
a huge kind of crisis with creativity and had to find out what was going on. That's where the Morning Pages was born from me and Tina. It's where I rebuilt that up for
Mm-hmm.
myself, and now I'm just happy with process rather than product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I resonate so deeply with this, with the seasonality of
Hmm.
creativity now, thank God.
Yeah.
Um, because I am definitely coming out of a creative winter, and I have become increasingly aware of the fact that I am coming out of a creative winter, and I've been trying to force myself
Hmm.
to work on the big things and just being like, why can't I? Why can't I just do this fucking thing? And then, like, we've been working together on a project. You've been mentoring on this book that I am, and I will write her. She will get done. But as I said to you last week, I need to put her down for a minute
Hmm.
because it's too big.
Yeah.
And I feel like what is currently happening, which I feel like you've been, not in a forceful way, but it is, every time we've worked together, it's almost as if you've been trying to tell me this the whole time, and I haven't necessarily been listening. Or the part of me, it's not that I've not been listening, but it's almost like I couldn't, it was like you were speaking a different language that I
Hmm.
just didn't
Hmm.
understand yet. And this idea of allowing the process to be the thing,
Hmm.
and I think that in my head it was the process towards the product, the process towards the project of this, like, which is the way that my tunnel vision works
100%.
sometimes. In like, if I'm working on the process is to write the book.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, actually the process is just to be creative. And what has happened, because when I messaged you last week saying I need to put the book down for a bit, it's too big, it's too heavy. And I thought that what was going to happen, which has happened previously in the past, is that I temporarily put creativity down completely. Like,
Right.
whenever I say I'm not doing this thing right now, it all stops. And the opposite has happened this time, which has been such a fucking relief. Of what has happened is that my brain's gone, okay, now that we've parked that for a minute, like, she's still there, but let's figure out the process
Hmm.
that works for
Okay.
you in order for us to pick her back up when you're ready.
Hmm.
Because I keep coming back to this thing at the moment of, what do I want my life to look like? And for so long, it's been like, my perfect day is, going for a big long walk and then writing, and not necessarily having much else to do other than those be the things that mean that I've had like a productive day.
Hmm. The tick
And that
boxes.
would bring me a lot of, yeah, the tick boxes of, and that is like such a beautiful version of life. But if I look at my life now, it could not be further away from that, and I am not doing either of those things.
Mm.
So in what fucking world is that all of a sudden going to happen? And attaching the process to a project isn't going to help me get there, because there's not always going to be a project.
Hmm.
And it's this, when you said then about the games, and you're just looking for clues, you're just taking every turn that you can to gain more clues. I feel like what's happened now is I'm allowing myself to just gain some clues
Hmm.
and stripping everything back. So it's like, no, so I was listening to a podcast, the How I Write podcast, and Maria Popova was on, who's the brain pickings lady. And she was saying, like, and so many writers that I've heard have said this around, I go for like a 4-hour walk and then I write. And that's their process. That's what they do. And I'm sure, and there's so many different ways that writers do it, but that is the one that I always remember because that is the one that I want. And so when I heard that, I was like, stop making everything so fucking complicated. Go for a walk and then write. Like, you don't have 4 hours at the moment, but you can go for a walk for 30 minutes and then write for 30 minutes. You can do that. And if you were to do that, what would make this something that feels sustainable and creatively, allows you to search for more clues? And it's writing something completely new every day and having absolutely no attachment to the story that comes out. Because not only does that allow me to have the process without the project at the end, which removes all of that pressure, but it also allows me to believe in the abundance of my own creativity.
And that's the jackpot.
Which is the thing. Like, it's the fear around, oh my God, this is the only good idea I'm ever going to have.
Yeah.
Which is bullshit.
Or that fear of being abandoned by your creativity if you dare to put it down.
Yes. And allowing it to be awful. Like, I sat down this morning. So I went for my walk this morning and I sat down and I started the little short story. And I think the first line was something like, he was shocked by what he saw when he opened the door. And I just laughed at myself and I was like, was he? Like, it was just like, what an original line to start with. Well done, Rebecca. But it's like, but it wasn't a judgmental thing. It was like, God, this is hilarious. It's terrible. But then, like, by the end of it, I was quite happy with what was coming out of me. But I think it's just that, like, searching for clues and allowing yourself to release the pressure of the project, for me in particular, has been a huge relief and is having a massive impact on my creativity and allowing myself to accept myself as, like, I'm a writer whether I'm working on a book or not. Like, this is just part of who I am. When it comes to the morning pages that you and Tina do, because there was something that you said right at the beginning around, when we're unwell or when we're in a space where we're a carer, or we are a creative and we're a creative person, but for whatever reason we're in a winter, and whether that's an internal winter or it's just because of the external things that are going on, how do you guide people through that?
Yeah. I have stuff I want to respond to what you've said just before I get into that one. So you said you're coming out of a winter, and it seems like you've found a way to be in spring rather than jump to summer. Right?
Okay.
Because I think sometimes we think we're going to come out of winter and it'll be summer. No, there's spring to have, which can be just as dark and cold and wet as winter, if not more so, because we're expecting sunshine and rainbows and lands and fields. And I think so delighted to hear that you found this wellspring once you've taken the pressure off. And I think there's so much wisdom and assuredness that comes from saying we need to stop because of X, Y, and Z. And like, it's such a lovely thing to hear, to get that voice note and hear you be like, I'm making this decision, and just be like, that's exactly the right decision you need to make. Not that I was expecting it or felt like I was leading you there in our sessions, but just being, I kind of felt like as the voice note came through, I was like, I know what this is. And I just knew I was like, I think I know what this is. I'm feeling so like proud for you, not of you, because I hate when people say that. It makes me cringe my face off. Proud for you that you felt confident, comfortable, and assured enough to know to have a conversation that could potentially be uncomfortable. Who wants to have that conversation? Like, it could be. Obviously, it's not. I'm delighted. And I'm sure if and when you want to, we will re-engage that whenever. But for me to know that you got it, right? Just to be like, the work is working. You know what I mean? And putting stuff down, I wouldn't have the play I have currently if I hadn't put it down.
Yeah.
And then finally, like, great that you've written some shit, because you can't have anything if you don't have shit. Do you know what I mean? Writing is probably, like, it's a really awkward, painful process because we have to swim upstream against all that criticism and all that
Mm-hmm.
self-doubt and all that unsureness. So like the discomfort of writing is almost the litmus test that you're pointing in the right direction. So it just sounds
Mm-hmm.
wonderful, everything you've said. But for anyone listening in, what might look like a negative step, putting the project down, stopping a mentoring, writing shit, is actually the exact energy to propel you forward.
Mm-hmm.
100%. And people looking in on that might have an opinion, but that's their creative process. That's different. And I think it
Mm-hmm.
can be difficult to make these decisions because we see what they look like on the surface too. If I put this down, I will not pick it back up. It will abandon me. It won't. It 100% won't. It takes a sort of self-belief and knowledge in oneself to be able to put it down comfortably and go, I know what this feels like sometimes, but I know it's not going anywhere. So yeah, I think that's just
Mm-hmm.
important to say. Your question about morning pages, how do you guide someone out of a winter? I think the first important thing is rest, which is
Mm-hmm.
obviously such a buzzword, I think, in these kind of self-help spaces. And that's going to look different for everyone. It's not just sleep. Rest can actually be exercising more, changing a diet, adding some practices in, like a meditation practice or a morning pages practice. Um, it's going to be different for everyone. We kind of developed a few tools that, much like the kind of one-on-one mentoring I do, are a little bit outside the realm of like what happens on the page. I think I'm really interested in this holistic writer's life and holistic creativity because so many workshops are technical skills, which are great, and
Mm-hmm.
we can all
Mm-hmm.
do that, but I don't know if we can. I think it's hard to approach them without a fertile
Yeah.
soil beneath us. And so we looked at things like gratitude, curiosity, a particular somatic practice called intentional resting, which Tina leads on because she's deep dived into that and knows so much more about it than I do. But like the gratitude for us does several things. It kind of helps fill the well a little bit. It helps maybe block some of that negative brain patterning that's happening. It also, I believe, helps you to be more inspired because if you have a bad day,
Mm-hmm.
you have to start looking for things to be grateful for. And if you're doing a daily practice, your day becomes almost like hyper fixated on finding something to be grateful for. And I just think
Mm-hmm.
that naturally slips into just looking more. And as Mary Oliver said, attention is the first step of devotion. And so when we
Mm-hmm.
reclaim our attention away from what we talked about earlier on, the doom scrolling, the 24-hour news cycles, the rest of the world, and pay attention to what we can see, which is limited because we have eyeballs, not cameras, in our faces. Well, some of us might. Well, we're not talking necessarily talking about them. Um, Everything else just falls away and it creates that space, a little bit like what we were talking about earlier on with the backrooms director, having that space. We give ourselves that
Mm-hmm.
space to be creative. And then I think we just have more like data points upon which to feel inspired by.
Yeah.
Um, Curiosity as a number two, I see curiosity as like a sort of machete in a jungle. It can just cut down whatever's blocking your path. And I think sometimes people apply, one of the ways we've been trying to encourage people to use it is not just about the creative problem. Zoom out and look at the creativity problem.
Mm-hmm.
How is this functioning? How is this fitting into my life? Why am I not feeling creative? Why does that bother me that I'm not being
Yeah,
creative?
yeah, yeah,
Because it
yeah.
doesn't bother a lot of people that they're not creative. They couldn't care less. Um, what's the voice that I'm hearing when I'm being critical to myself? And just really zooming all the way out and using curiosity to kind of invite
Mm.
whatever on that train line coming for you. I think curiosity will do that. In many ways, the morning pages, the Julia Cameron morning pages, the 3 pages by hand, stream of consciousness, does the same thing. But I think for us, framing it as curiosity as something you can just do in your body without having to sit and write, because that can feel like a task and that can feel like a to do, and that gets in the way sometimes, I think. To just sit and like be curious about the bigness of it all, and the questions of like, why am I in this, course? Why am I feeling wintered? What's the issues? What my problems? And then once that starts to loosen, zooming in, okay, what could my next project be about? Well, let's look around and see. Let's have a think. And it's like a sort of
Hmm.
telescope and a microscope. It can function in many ways. Morning Pages does that too, but I think Curiosity does it without um, there being a kind of point to it, or a product, 3 pages by
Yeah.
hand, in the same way. And then a lot of it will come out through discussion that we have with the group. So last year we did it, and we had a much smaller group than the pilot year, which was actually really beneficial to have more space for conversation, because the rest will look different for everyone. The gratitude and the curiosity will look different for everyone, and just other advice that we want to give will look different for everyone. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, but I think they're good places to start.
Mm,
Resting, gratitude, and curiosity.
yes. It's interesting. The gratitude in particular, there was two things there. The curiosity around like, why am I so bothered by
Mm,
this? I think is such a powerful question to ask yourself, because I am someone who gets bothered like by a lot of things, and just interrogating like, why do I care so much?
mhm,
What is it about this thing that is not allowing me to let it go? And does it mean that I have to have a conversation with someone and then I will be able to let it go? Or does it mean that I'm not supposed to? And
mm.
understanding the difference between those two things is so powerful, and has been very powerful for me in terms of allowing myself to very slowly accept that there are certain things in my life to do with my creativity that even if I put them down temporarily, I will always pick them back
Yeah.
up. And we've spoken about this. And allowing myself to accept that this is never going to go away. So the work now is to create a life that just allows me to put it down less often.
Hmm.
And then around the gratitude piece, I have always struggled so much with gratitude, and I am no longer in that place, which is great. But one of the reasons that I struggled with it so much is just because it felt like bullshit.
Hmm.
Like it felt like, and this was me in the midst of my new age spirituality journey, um, and being in this like, it all just felt like lies. It felt like I was gaslighting myself into being grateful for things that I wasn't fucking grateful for. And I've danced around many, many different things in terms of my spiritual life and beliefs and all of that shit. But there's this Christian creator that I follow, and she was talking about her prayer process, and it was under the acronym of GLOW, so GLOW. And the G was gratitude, and she was like, "This is how I pray. The first thing I have is gratitude, and I will be grateful for all of the beautiful things, and I will be grateful for the hard stuff too." So, which I feel like is such an important part of gratitude that just doesn't get spoken about in those spaces, because it's almost like it's not allowed. But I feel so much more comfortable with gratitude now because I am grateful for the hard shit, because it's allowed me to get to this point. I'm still alive.
Hmm.
And who knows, if those things hadn't have happened, I would be. Like, I don't know. I'm grateful for the good stuff too, and having that truthfulness around my own gratitude in the way that I need to express it, not the way someone is telling me I need to express it, actually allows me to be grateful for for all of it. There's a song by an artist called Cam, which is the song is called we are I am wait I am God, something like that. I can't remember what the name of the title song is, but it's one of the most powerful lines for me of a song where it just hit me in the moment when I first heard it, and it was, "I am grateful for all that I am and all that I'm not." And I was just like, yeah, damn fucking right. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I am glad I am not. I can tell you that for free. And, we see that within our immediate family and realize how close we are to possibly have been becoming that.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that I'm not. And then the other part of that prayer process is, the first one is gratitude. The second one is let it all out, like let it out, because God already knows anyway. So you might as well tell him just
Hmm.
out loud. The third one was open to desire or something like that. It's like, speak your desires out loud, be open and honest about exactly what it is that you desire. And then the W is wait. You
Nice.
just wait. And I just thought that was such a, and I use it now,
Hmm.
like I do. And I wouldn't necessarily identify as a Christian in the ways that other people would identify as Christian, but I've always prayed. I've always prayed. Ever since I was a kid, I've prayed to something. And I don't know who I'm speaking to, but I am speaking to someone. And I just found that process really helpful. Particularly around the gratitude,
Hmm.
the gratitude side of things. Um, we will wrap up the conversation now, as we have been talking. We could go on for a very long time,
Yeah,
and
infinitely.
on a multiple different back rooms in this conversation. um, but what does my final question want to be for you? What Yeah, if we're going to do the OW of the prayer, right? So we're opening up the desire to God, whatever form that takes for everybody. What is your dream creative life?
Hmm. Just for it to be mine, you know,
Mm,
and for it to be something that continues to engage me and excite me and serve me in the ways that it has. I look at a lot of my friends and colleagues in the creative kind of industries and have a lot of respect for them when they're freelance and just think I could not do that because everything, like my rent would be dependent on how well this thing
mhm,
sells. And I think that would immediately take away
mm,
the kind of agency. Um, I look at some people who have a really great way of making that work, and
mhm.
finding a way to support that fully freelance or kind of subsidize with part-time work. I have so much respect for that. I don't think I could do that. I think it would be too much pressure, and I think that's also a recognition that my stuff takes time. I'm a
Mm,
slow burn, meandering oxbow river of a creative. Like that's just how I work. That gives me the time and space to be big about it, and to actually put the steps in, so to speak. Um, I don't necessarily like the word like easier came up, but actually I don't mind the struggle. I think the struggle is part
mm,
of it. Seth Rogen made a statement recently about if you're using AI to write, then you're not a writer, because the writing is that's why I do it. And I think that's so true to be like, I enjoy the struggle. I
mm,
enjoy the working
mhm.
it out. And writing for me is so much like a puzzle sometimes. And I enjoy finding out how to make it work. Going
Yeah.
from going from enigma to puzzle is an enjoyable process for me. Um, just the image of like a kind of flowing river is coming to my mind of just like a steadiness to it. Um,
Mm,
I'd love to like travel more with it and like
yeah.
to see it as a vehicle to explore the world. I think that could be really fun. Um, but I like having a day job. Do you know what I mean? I think that helps keep me a bit grounded. But it also makes sure that I can explore and it allows me to untether myself with the creativity because that's not dependent on a 9 to 5 capitalist model. That can just be its own thing.
Mhm.
And so I'm quite happy. I would like to be less of a procrastinator.
Oh God,
Yeah,
yes. I think that's the burden of being a creative.
yeah,
I would love for someone who is a creative and doesn't procrastinate on their creativity to let us know what the secret is,
yeah,
because
yeah. And I love talking about it more. Like, when I was
Mm,
touring my last book, I really wanted to do more like in discussions than just
yeah.
performances. And I actually don't think I got the opportunity to, maybe once I got the opportunity to do that. But I love the idea of talking about it, like, and performing, the touring of it felt just as much of a part of the creative process as the writing of it did. And so that was
Mhm.
really an interesting thing to explore. So maybe more opportunities to do some of the holistic work around it, like more mentoring, I think is such a wonderful thing because I have learned so much from it. And I really
Mm,
love, like, in just in that introverted way of knowing I've got time with a person to sit and talk about something that's really meaningful to them, like that just satisfies a part of my brain and my heart to just be like, that feels good. Um, a bit like the icky guy, like it's something I can do that's of service to people, but
yeah.
I also just enjoy the process of sitting and listening to someone talk about their whatever's going on for them in that creative space. Very much like this conversation where it's just about the conversation. And so
Mm,
yeah, like a kind of opening up of it maybe to be less about just the creative product and the creative work, for that to maybe be able to cast a wider net, and for me to be able to
mm.
like lift my head up and talk about, be the human behind the creative work as well, would be interesting to see how that would flow. And to maybe, like, I've learned so much from doing morning pages, from doing mentorship work, and just like maybe creating something around that, like some kind of um opportunity to discuss or engage with that more, I think could be really fun because it's just been so fruitful for me. So yeah,
Mhm.
it's kind of not massively different from where I'm at now, which is a really beautiful thing to be able to say, really.
Yes, it is. That is, yeah, it's nice to have that realization of like, oh, actually, it's pretty similar to right now.
Yeah.
Um, and if you were to give, so say there's somebody listening to this, they're in their creative winter, or they have that voice within themselves that they didn't realize was there. That's like, well, yeah, I am a creative. I am destined to make this thing. But they do feel that block of actually stepping over the threshold
Mm.
into doing something about it. What do you think is the first thing that they should do?
You could help untangle the knot of that resistance by being curious about it, first of all. You don't,
Mm,
and not giving yourself the promise slash threat of diving off the deep end, of being like, what would it potentially look like to maybe do this, right? And just to sit with the potential of it, because some of that resistance can be really heavy
mhm,
and scary, and just maybe not
mm,
necessarily safe for a person in a particular time or space. I don't know the particulars. There's not a person sat in front of us for you to know that. Um, because you don't, no one should have to step into their creative flow with that baggage, right? With that
mm,
harpoon in their side as they're trying to swim upstream. So trying to unpack a little bit of that beforehand. And also just seeing creativity as just an act that you do. Like,
yeah.
if you are a religious person and you pray, that's an action that we do. If you're someone who enjoys cooking, we do all these things, but for some reason creativity sits somewhere differently in our brain. Like there's more weight or value or pressure or um, sort of thought around it than it is. And I think that's maybe attached to the idea of product, of people having notions above
Mm,
themselves and the
mhm,
criticism of that. It doesn't have to be something you share with the world. It can just be for you. So if that takes the form of a diary or a journal entry, great. It doesn't have to go anywhere. You don't have to do anything with it unless you want to. I think that's often a thing that we forget.
mm,
Creativity can just be a thing that you do. It doesn't have to come with this baggage of, well, I don't want to read it on stage. I don't want to publish a book. You don't have to. You genuinely don't have to. And I think that's a kind of
mm,
capitalist thing that's crept into all of our psyches about creativity, that it's product based. Again, however far you zoom out from that, there's still a product at the end. There's still an exchange of commerce at the end. can creativity feel like a spiritual practice in that way? It's just something that you do as part of your routine, like a self-care routine, like going for walks or meditating or yoga, whatever it is. How can it most comfortably and safely fit into your life as it is? Nothing needs to change for you to be creative. Nothing needs to happen for you to be creative. You don't need to prepare to be creative. It can just be whatever it is without it being good or worthy or valuable. It inherently is all those things. So if you are on that cusp and feeling trepidation about it, you don't have to jump. You can just dip your toes. And if that leads you into wading deeper and deeper, then great. You'll find a level that you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, how the 10 steps to becoming a published author are, because that doesn't have to be the goal. And it maybe shouldn't be
Yeah.
the goal for a lot of people, because I think that is a commitment that can be hard and can be really
Yeah.
defeating sometimes and comes with a lot of pressure, and that's not, and will then therefore change the creative process and how it functions for us. So I think it can just be what it is, however small that looks. So you don't have to take this big step.
I love that. What a lovely conversation.
Yeah,
Thank you for talking about all of that with me.
thanks. It's been really fun. I love our whirling dervish of conversations.
Oh, whirling, yeah. We'll have to get you back when you release your next book so you can do your discussion about it.
Yes, buddy. How long have you got?